Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first online edition of our Innovation Bootcamp. If you haven't joined us previously, Innovation Bootcamp is a cycle of 6 interactive workshops that we're running, set within the context of IdeaDrop's proven strategic innovation implementation framework. And our goal is to equip you with the tools, resources, and actionable takeaways that will help you create and execute a comprehensive innovation plan in your organization. So obviously, due to COVID-19, we wanted to bring the session online for our delegates that already signed up for the event in London. We will hopefully be hosting these events back in person in the near future once the climate surrounding the current situation is a lot clearer. But in the meantime, we are ready to go in an online version. So my name is Callan. I'm the head of customer success here at IdeaDrop. I work very closely with our clients across a range of different sizes, industries, to help them optimize their innovation programs. Today, I'm going to be highlighting some core elements of an effective innovation workflow and discussing 2 slightly different approaches. Thankfully, it's not just my voice you're going to be hearing today. I'm joined by Dan Francis, the head of innovation at BDO.
Hi, good morning.
And also by Cynan Clucas and Pavlos Konstas from Chaucer's innovation consulting team.
Hi, good morning.
Hola,
So as we go through, feel free to tweet us your questions and feedback. And if we get time at the end, we will hopefully get a chance to answer some of those. You can get involved using the hashtag IdeaDropBootcamp and use the @mention us at the handle. This is IdeaDrop. So some key takeaways for today's session then. Firstly, what is an innovation workflow and why do you need one? And secondly, how should you progress ideas through your workflow? And then finally, who is responsible for an innovation workflow in your organization? Start with the question, how do successful organizations innovate? Well, with new technologies appearing almost daily and against the backdrop of constantly changing client and consumer demands, the ability to innovate is crucial. And it's one of the only ways that you can sustain business growth and continue to have a competitive edge. If you leave innovation to just unfold by chance, your failure is virtually guaranteed. And if you somehow do manage to come across a winning idea, if you haven't put the work in to develop your framework, the chances are you're not best placed to optimally capitalize on it. The best innovation programs are underpinned by a fusion of systemic processes, people, and best-in-class tools. Now, you may already have these 3 magic ingredients of a great team, new ideas, and possibly even technology and tooling to support it. But blending and connecting these 3 pillars is often where many enterprises struggle. Developing a truly sustainable innovation process that is scalable, hardwired into the culture of your organization, and continually delivering tangible impact requires meticulous planning and execution. So at IdeaDrop, we've overseen hundreds of global enterprise innovation programs. We've developed a proven implementation plan that consistently delivers results, impact, and value. At our last event, partnering with KPMG, we discussed how to successfully set innovation goals and how critical innovation goals are to ensuring alignment within your organization. And at today's session, we will cover the following big step in the process, which is setting up your innovation workflow. So what is the purpose of having an innovation workflow? When it comes to innovation, harnessing the collective brain power of your organization is, of course, extremely important. But when it comes to successful innovation management, you need to do more than just collect and review ideas, right? You need a structure to develop ideas into business actions or marketable products. And what exactly is an innovation workflow? Well, simply put, it is a series of steps that connect the idea conception all the way through to its implementation. So great workflows are designed as a streamlined process which is managed in a way that reflects the company's structure and its own innovation goals. Ideally, you will have a set of well-defined goals by this stage, as they are crucial in defining the qualitative criteria for passing an idea from one stage of the workflow to the next. If not, and you didn't manage to catch us at our last event where we covered innovation goals, make sure you go and check out the blog at ideadrop.co/blog. And there is a really good article on there around strategic innovations and the importance of goal setting in order to achieve it. So how to manage your innovation workflow? So we described it as a series of steps, right? That sounds nice and simple, and in reality, it's a lot more nuanced than that. There are different approaches. So two of the ones that we're going to be looking at today are a centralized approach and a distributed approach. So if we start with the centralized approach, a good example of this, of centralized innovation management, is one of our clients, Ericsson. Now, obviously, they're a global enterprise, but they have separate innovation hubs across the world, which exist to collect, process, and develop innovative ideas that are generated by the rest of the business. Occasionally, employees who come up with some of these ideas, if they are deemed to be, they meet the criteria that are set, they have the chance to leave their day job aside for some time, and they move to work on their idea as part of this innovation hub, and they get coaching and guidance. And if it's successful, they have the opportunity to see their idea take the journey from the moment they thought of it all the way through to a fully developed concept. And in this case, they're supported by groups of people whose full-time job it is to manage that flow, but they're involving employees from across the organization in the process. Now, that might work great for a company like Ericsson, but it may not be the best fit for other organizations. So an alternative is a distributed innovation workflow or innovation management approach. And this is where responsibility for driving innovation is just distributed across the whole organization and lies with people who are authorized to monitor, review, and process as part of their normal day-to-day jobs. So at IdeaDrop, if we were to implement an instance of IdeaDrop using this structure, that might be your sort of admin and moderator network, where within each team you have specific people who have the authority to make these changes and move ideas through the workflow process. These sort of admin moderators, innovation committee members, whatever you might call them in your organization, they are essentially anyone whom you trust and have trained to absorb and understand your innovation goals and are capable of managing the pipeline of ideas on a daily basis. So, for example, department heads, project managers, team leads, or even levels below that are upskilled in your strategic issues and what the purpose of your innovation program is. So two different approaches there. There's not one size fits all. It's about understanding the nuances of your particular organization and what might be a better fit for you, and also what are your resource constraints. So have a think as we go through this. Which one do you feel more affinity towards? Which one do you feel like is more appropriate for your organization? But with that, I'm going to leave it there and hand over to Dan, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about how innovation works at BDO.
Right, let me just make sure I'm sharing the right thing, which I'm not. Hold on. Okay, hopefully you can all see the presentation. Do let me know if you can't.
Yep, all good.
I'm Dan Francis. I'm Head of Innovation and Digital at BDO. So it's a large professional services accountancy firm. I've done innovation for a few years. my takeaway from working at people like American Express and Nectar, Sainsbury's and Barclays is it's different everywhere. So small companies like my previous company, Location Sciences, a startup, innovation is very, very different from working in a bank. But you can do it, and I'm going to just talk to, I guess, a few points around my experience around innovation and the innovation process just over the next 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to go quickly, okay, because you've all been staring at screens all week for a couple of weeks. So I'm going to try and make this as lively and exciting as we can make innovation on a webinar. So this is what I think most people think the creative process is like around ideas and innovation. Reality is it's not. This is pretty much what most people go through. Okay, we're doing this on a couple of projects and digital product launches at the moment. We're at the kind of deadline stage at the moment on a couple, and it's tough. So ideas and innovation is difficult, and there is a reason behind that. So this is the one and only theory bit of the presentation. So if you can get through this, you're doing well. So you have ideas, okay? So there's the middle piece. Now ideas are free, okay? It's an imaginative process. Anybody can have ideas. You just need a bit of time and the right stimulus. But the act of putting ideas into a business as a change function, as an innovation, is what requires it requires a process, and it requires time, effort and resources, and increases risk to your company, but it does create value. So it's either revenue or efficiencies or just makes everybody feel better. So think very differently around ideas and then the innovation process, because they are different for good reason. And I guess I want to talk a little bit about some of the technologies that give rise to some of those innovations. So often you find the combination of new technologies, which is basically what I do as a job, is the most interesting piece and gives rise to these new value creations. So if you look at where you can combine computing power and AI, two relatively new technologies in terms of the massive amounts of computing power we now have, and the rise of AI as a mainstream piece, you now get the ability, and excuse me, this is video, so this might not play for all, but you get the ability, for example, for a computer now to learn in real time to recognize emotions, and this is obviously emotions being recognized here. Another example around combinations of these two powerful types of technology is self-driving. And again, the video might not play for all, but what you're seeing here is how a computer in a car learns that two bikes are pulling out in front of a stationary object. That's something that even humans find difficult to make a decision around. But here we see artificial intelligence, massive amounts of computing power, computer vision, and detectors all combining to create a new innovation, a new invention in the world. I put this slide in just because I really like the slide, actually, to be honest, but it does give an example of how technologies are able now to take over what human beings have previously been able to do. So the ability for people to be able to recognize patterns is a very human trait. Computers are really good at doing this now. So whether it's bank fraud or whether it's work and time-place studies, these are now technologies that can be built into new ideas and new innovations. And these are things that you can start to think about in your innovation processes, how to introduce these new technologies and how these examples can help you do this. Just in a few more examples of technology, you aren't seeing fireworks here. This is actually a drone show in China. So just goes to show you how people are using technology to reinvent existing things. These are things I think you'll be seeing in the UK and other places over the next few years. Massive amounts of computing power, low-tech flight technology around drones and battery power combining to give you a brand new experience. I'm going to skip past this one. Another thing around technology in the home as well as the workplace is we're all promised robots. What we've got now is huge amounts of automation. So you've got robot vacuum cleaners, you've got automation around heating and lighting and ventilation. You've got new endpoints, new computing endpoints in your home around Alexa and Google, all delivering services that we didn't think were possible just a few years ago. But the next part really, I think, for the innovation process is how do you think about your innovations in terms of products? How do you think and how do you create the business value for your customers and your clients and your internal colleagues. So again, I think just in the spirit of everything that we're going through over the next few weeks, some fun examples to get you started. These are all actual products that you can buy on Amazon. These are inventions and innovations that people have come up and sell. So you've got LED slippers, you've got things like piano doorbells to personalize your announce your entry to your friends. You've got my kids' favorite, which is pizza scissors. You've got dog breader. This is a really good example, I think, for if you think about the innovation process, think about who the customer is, who is going to purchase or buy or consume your innovation at the end of the day. I think in the end of the day, this product is not aimed at the dog, it's simply aimed at the owner. And that's often a way of framing your innovation is to look at the different lenses of the different stakeholders around this. And again, I think something that's come in handy for all those at home at the moment, a portable toaster, so the knife that toasts your bread as it slices. And something probably largely redundant, this is one that's always popular in our office when I give this presentation internally within BDO in London. This is the anti-theft lunch bags. But so why bother? Why bother innovating? Why should you go through this process? Well, the really simple value, as I alluded to earlier, around ideas that are innovations that take place in organizations or external or just in your personal life, is that innovation creates value. And you'll see for the top tech companies at the moment, which are fairly obvious to you all, they create huge amounts of value. And you'll see Apple, Google, Microsoft, and so on rising to the top here, and Alibaba and some of the other ones hot on their tail. And then for me, this is a quote that stuck with me over several years of working around innovation. So this is 2,000 years old, this quote. A new idea is delicate. It can be killed by a sneer or by a yawn. It can be stabbed to death by a quip and worried to death by a frown on the right man's brow. I think we've all probably been in situations or observed situations in enterprise and in large corporates where this happens with ideas. Now, we have implemented Idea Drop at BDO. We're 5,500 people in the UK. We have a good third of those on our platform at the moment. On the right-hand side, you'll see some of the internal comms that we do. So we marketed this internally very strongly around our ideation platform, open to all, and everybody can collaborate and innovate within BDO. This is a very high-level summary. I'm not going to go through it in detail of our process, but I mean the key takeaways for me is we have an administration team. So we have a team that are looking at ideas and helping unblock things where needed to. So this is I think something that you should all consider around the innovation process is who is able to facilitate these ideas and turn them into actual business cases and innovation. We have specific people charged in each area, whether it's within the business, so our tax and our audit areas, or whether it's things like HR or finance. We have people that are actively looking and engaged in the process. And then we have an example here. Just this is Coffee Connections. This was a junior auditor when BDO wanted to find a way digitally to connect with senior members of the firm. So he came up with Coffee Connections, which is a kind of like a sort of Tinder for BDO, although I'm not allowed to say that in BDO, I get into trouble. But this is essentially a way of matching more junior members of BDO, and we bring on 600 people a year through training into the accountancy firm, and this enables them just to book almost like a sort of roulette approach, a 15-minute slot with a senior member of the organisation. And we've moved this actually now to Teams. So this was being piloted. So we created a POC, we iterated on that POC, and then the MVP went into a prototype just before lockdown occurred. And we've moved this very swiftly into a Teams meeting now. So we're running this pilot virtually, and it's proving very successful in connecting people together. And that's everything from me. Thank you.
That's interesting. I was just going to ask very quickly how some of those processes had adapted to the new world we're all living in. So everyone's remote now. Have you seen that it's you've been able to sort of double down on the value, and that we've always said we always say that the risk in any organization is you have a great idea and you turn to the person next to you and they're having a terrible day and they just huff at you and the idea dies then and there. And I think that risk is exponentially greater when there is no one next to you and the dog doesn't even seem to think your idea is all that great. So it's interesting that you're already adapting to the COVID-19 and you're finding new ways to connect people and deliver innovation.
Well, they say innovation happens in times of great change. Often war, famine, disease are times where human race has innovated at its greatest. And I think we're seeing that now in BDO. People are responding. The whole company is mobilized to help our clients through this in lots of different ways. Some clients are really super busy at the moment because they've got industries that are impacted by this, but in a productive way. We've got clients that are either going out of business or don't want to go out of business as a result of this. So we are innovating at pace around that, and we use idea drop more so because of that now, and because of the digital platform, it's very, very easy for us now to collaborate with that.
Great. So I'll hand over to the Chaucer team then.
Great. First of all, can you see our screen?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Let's take it away then.
Morning, everyone. Let's go to the first slide. So this is who we are. I'm Callan Clucas. I'm an innovation lead at Chaucer.
Hi, and I'm Pavlos Konstas. I'm an innovation consultant and in the General Digital Advisory for quite a few years now.
So the reason you have two of us this morning, not just one like everybody else, is that the original intent for our appearance here was that we were going to do an interactive workshop with you guys on site. And obviously that's changed because of the COVID situation. So there's still two of us. We're going to try and condense this into 15 minutes overview of what we would have done with you in larger groups, and give you some insight into what our innovation frameworks look like. The challenge for us is that we're speaking to an empty room with the same structure that we probably would have used to a full room. So no feedback, no kind of way to gauge how you're feeling about what we're telling you. It makes it a little bit more difficult. So just bear with us as we go through this, and if I could make a play, cut us some slack, it doesn't quite work the way we intended. Let's go. So for those of you that don't know Chaucer, and I suspect quite a lot of the people who are online don't, we are a mid-sized consulting firm, experts in creating value from transformation and data. This is the standard cred slide that we show to everybody who doesn't know us, just to say, hey, look, we have got clients, we are real. We've been doing this for 30 or something years, and actually we're recognized by the Financial Times as one of the leading digital transformation consulting firms in the UK. So you can see the broad range of clients that we work with. Innovation forms a core part of the work we do with most of these clients. So it's everything from large global energy businesses to everybody's favorite HS2. And what we try to do in each of those environments is really act as change agents and help organizations understand how to implement the change that they see they need to do. So, what is innovation? That's a big question, isn't it? We were kind of conscious that there was a mixed audience for the workshop that we were looking to deliver. So we wanted to really start with not necessarily a definition of it, but just an exploration that innovation can mean many things to many people. So it could be a dog umbrella, and I think that's a brilliant example of, and I'd love to see the insight that said that was a great idea, but that's a different conversation for a different day. But you know, innovation could be that, but equally innovation can be taking things that already exist, smashing them together and making value out of those things for an enterprise. So you know, there's a very broad, very long, very elastic way of defining what innovation is and what value innovation delivers. So, you know, it's not just a means to an end, it's a means to achieving strategic goals. And I think that's really critical here, is that when we move on to the next slide in a moment, you'll start to see how different parts of the workflow inform each other to create something that becomes continuous. So what we're looking to show you here is different elements of an innovation loop Now, the way that Callan talked about a workflow was sort of quite linear: goals, workflow, shaping, definitions, comms, KPIs, and reporting. In our world, we try and think of it as a much more continuous cycle, right? So that you could effectively jump into this loop at any of these 5 points and start a piece of work that was to inform the next piece. And it can almost go backwards or forwards. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that it becomes a catalyst to the next stage and the next stage and the next stage. So this is about, for us, innovation is about really developing offerings that are aligned between the needs of an organization and the needs of the organization's customers. And within a framework like this, what we're trying to achieve is really sort of well-governed, measurable, continuous, sustainable, operationalized innovation, so that it becomes part of the culture rather than something that's owned by parts of the culture. So is that if you say to them, what's the biggest challenge to innovation? Almost everybody in the room will say silos. That's our hardest thing to break down. Different silos in a business have different cultures, have different ways of operating, have different KPIs. How do you bring all of that together in a way that allows you to move out of innovation, out of silos and the kind of traditional approach, which is research driven, into something that becomes much more organic and much more cultural? So if for the sake of this, we start with strategic alignment, what is that? What does that mean? So it's really about goal setting, eliminating ambiguity. It's about achieving consensus across all of those different silos, because by getting consensus, you can then implement a governance structure. And in anything to do with innovation, governance is critical. So what we're talking about here is really building and maintaining stakeholder consensus around things like shared organizational vision, goals, actions, ways of working, all of the things that kind of bottom out what it is that the organization wants to achieve and how innovation can play into that. And that also lends itself into the transformation space in the same sort of way. So moving that forwards, governance is really important, because if you don't have governance, you can't really determine where the accountability for different parts of the innovation process lie, or the transformation process as well. So if you move from strategic alignment, where you get everybody together and you agree, this is how we're going to work, this is what we need to work towards, and this is why, you can then move towards organizational readiness, which is really around bringing people with you on the journey. Now, in the digital transformation space, there's a great piece of data that is that 75% of all digital transformation programs that are executed fail, and they fail because the enterprises and organizations fail to bring the people in the organization with them on the journey. So it's not about the software or the technology. It's not about the dog umbrella. It's actually about bringing people with you so that they will see the value in coming on the journey. So that's about engagement, right? And what determines engagement is really understanding cultural, financial, operational drivers and blockers that exist in an organization. Because if you've got people who are culturally, that last quote about the sneer and the yawn, if those kind of things exist culturally, you need to take them out of the way, otherwise things won't move forwards. There's always going to be a subjective viewpoint that can overrule an objective one, and it's critical to get to objectivity on all of these issues, not just subjectivity. So we're talking about behaviors, understanding what the organizational behaviors are, understanding the consequences of some of those organizational behaviors, because if you don't understand the consequences, you don't know why the outcomes that come from them exist. And then understanding, again, enablers and blockers, so that you can remove the blockers and facilitate the enablers. So that's really the cultural piece around organizational readiness. When you understand that, move across the loop towards consumer insight. And then what we get to is that this is essentially about avoiding assumptions. So the assumption that a dog gives a shit about an umbrella, right? It's not the greatest example, but it's present. Dog doesn't care less. Dogs like to get wet. Dogs have got fur for a reason. So the dog, as the consumer in that space, will go, I don't need that, I'm not interested. But quite right, there are a group of people who are owners who are going to go, oh, my dog needs an umbrella, so I'm going to pay money for that. Now, you can't buy research that will tell you idiocy is a great thing. But on that occasion, clearly, stupidity has value. I would never advocate going down the stupidity route to a client, but hey, that's great. So what we're trying to do here is avoid assumptions. And that some of you in this audience might be familiar with the value proposition canvas, part of which encourages you to explore those jobs and pains and gains that your customers have, right? So what jobs do they need to do? What tasks are they trying to complete? How do you add value, remove friction, increase efficiency in the time they spend trying to achieve those things so that you're addressing their pains and giving them gains, right? If you can do those things, then you start to be able to identify again objectively where the value for your customer sits in an innovation process. What is it that you could do more that would support them better, that will give them a better experience or a better product? So it's understanding known and unknown needs and behaviors, and you can only do that through research. And generally speaking, that research begins with qualitative, and then you take your qualitative results and you put it into quant, and you start to establish whether the things that you determine in qual actually have efficacy to a broader group. So that's where that kind of iterative idea generation piece can sit, that Callan was talking about and Dan was talking about. Okay, next is the core capabilities, and this is mapping and gapping. So what we would do here is look at the competencies and the technologies that are in an organization and define where they're delivering value and also where there are gaps in value not being delivered, right? So the gaps are just as important as the spaces that we're doing well in, arguably more important. And this is about understanding how we can prioritize investments. So if we're doing well in a particular area, do we need to invest in that to keep it moving forward? Or should we be looking at prioritizing investments in an area that we're doing really poorly in? So white space, what white space exists that our customers are looking at that we're not fulfilling any obligation towards? Should we prioritize that over the spaces that we're doing well in? So this is about return on investment. And then the last thing on the loop is industry foresight. Now, this is sort of validating everything that we've done to date against what we see as trends that are happening on the horizon. So there's a near horizon, a medium horizon, and a distant horizon. What's emerging, right? What are we seeing clustering in the distance that's going to start to inform how we could adapt all of the learnings that we've just created out of this loop so that we can start to say, okay, the next iteration should perhaps go in this direction. So Pavlos is going to talk shortly about how we can de-risk through doing sort of short explorations of some of the things that might come out of looking at foresight. So benchmarking might be an example that is a near horizon. So we could say, okay, all of these things that we've learned, let's assume that our competitors have learned them too. How are we then going to sit against our competitors in a particular space to ensure that what we're delivering is ahead of what they're delivering? So you could then take a customer experience audit as a benchmarking exercise and say, well, we know that we're doing these things and we know we need to improve in this area. What is it that our competitors are doing in this area that's better than us? And then equally, what is it that's happening in the broader landscape? So not just in our vertical industry, but in a horizontal space for each of the kind of interactions that we need to deliver. And how do we benchmark to best in class against those particular things? So that's the kind of the oversight of the innovation loop that we work to. What we'd hope to do today was to take each of those areas and allocate it to a small group of 5 or 6 people, and then get you to explore how that would impact your particular enterprise. Clearly, we're not going to get that kind of reciprocity out of this situation, but if that's something that anybody wants to explore at a later date when we can all leave our houses, then we'd be delighted to come back and do that with you. But for the moment, what I'll do is I'll hand over to Pavlos and he can talk about innovation flow principles and how those sort of backfill to this.
Thank you, Kynan. So basically, I'm going to keep two points from what Kynan said. The first is silos, and the second is the goals. So these are usually two preventatives, let's say, that would not allow innovation to flourish. And that's because silos are very well established in a number of organizations, and even if you try to change them holistically, sometimes the establishment itself is going to react, and without a plan on how to mitigate that and a change environment ready, there wouldn't be a success. And on the goal side, it's usually because we live in an economy that is ever changing, so goals are ambitious, goals are bold, and with bold goals comes big investment and the big commitment and big expectation, right? So how do we deep bundle that? So first of all, on the silo side, we don't need to change our whole organization when we start innovating. We can change. We can start experimenting with bringing different capabilities into small. We call them squads, and the industry might call them squads, but small number of teams that they have the core capabilities to solve a problem or to experiment on a solution. And a lot of organizations are trying to do that on a scale without first trying to prove the concept with their colleagues and with other parts of their organization. And how do we break down the big goals is because we mentioned that quite extensively, that to innovate, we always need to look through the user's lenses. And first of all, we need to identify who the user is. So a safe goal in order that will allow us to innovate with not such a big commitment on effort and budget is to translate these goals into user KPIs. So that big goal that I have as an aspiration as an organization, what does it actually mean for my user? It may mean move the screen from the left to the right, or create a round button instead of a rectangular one because it catches the eye more. It might be that simple. So, and that allows us to start from a safe base. And these three principles is basically observations that we have seen in a number of our clients, things that they are starting to go wrong, and things that they are really easy to mitigate to safely start that journey. And there are three things. First of all, you don't need to make bold investment decisions to innovate. You can start from little things that will require little effort and little budget, and that will allow whoever is reviewing that budget to have less expectations. And if something doesn't work, because not everything is going to work, if you commit 10K and 2 weeks of people's times, and something doesn't work, probably, I mean, you can say it didn't work, I'm gonna experiment more, and you will be allowed to do that. But if you make a commitment of 10 million and 6 months of people's times, then expectations will be there, and you won't be able to justify if something didn't work. That's why always, moving to the second one, always aim for the fish, not the whale. And the whale will come, but you need to start small in order to allow to fail. Innovation doesn't exist if we don't anticipate failure, if we do not tolerate and embrace failure and learn from it. And the third most important one, which to me is, I dislike the word BAU, business as usual, like the abbreviation. I don't think there is such thing as business as usual. It's what led us to what many organizations have today, which is legacy systems, rigid structures, things no one is using, and it's just a burden for the organization. How do you get away from that? These multidisciplinary teams that we talked about, they should and they need to have end-to-end responsibility for that product, service, whatever it is, whether it's internal, whether it's external, because that's the only way that you will keep that product alive, and you will be able to track change, to meet with users, to interact with users, and to have this loop, basically, to continuously iterate on that product. And you'll be surprised that a number of organizations I've worked with, and they really embraced the first two parts, and they really started innovating, and they started, building prototypes and MVPs, and they're like, oh, that works, I'm gonna scale it, and then I'm gonna hand it over to a back office in China or an outsourced partner we have that maintains our technology. Like, okay, and what's the end point of that? Well, like, how are you going to make sure that that is continuously living product? How do you test it with your users, whether in 1 year, in 6 months from now, it's still something they need? So these are the three main principles that they're cultural elements, I would say, mostly about how we need to behave to let innovation grow in our organizations. And obviously, as Kunen said, we would walk through this with you with live examples from your organizations, and it would be much more interactive. But since we can't do that, I'm going to just focus on one part of it. And I know it's not the whole flow, but that's the part of the flow which I've personally identified as the one that's preventing innovation the most, which are stage gates, like project stage gates, this very rigid project management structure that that bureaucracy around it that kills innovation. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't have governance, and Kunen mentioned that you should have governance, otherwise you're not able to know, especially at the scale, whether something is working, whether something is not working, and how do you mitigate risks, basically. But the proposal we usually make, and it works so far in all of the engagements we had, is that you alleviate all these rigid points that an idea needs to go through to actually end up somewhere, with flexible waypoints. And the reason I put one waypoint and not a number is that there isn't a holy grail solution. So I cannot give you a template, say, use that in your organization. The waypoints will be put at the point at the different points in the innovation flow that makes sense for you, for your organization. That is, what is your risk tolerance? What is the point that you need to have a sense check? Do I actually continue doing what I'm doing? It is working, it's not working. Do I have information to make a decision, or do I need to go back and ask for this information? That's the waypoint that is meaningful. Is not a rigid business case that will be stored in a hard drive and nobody is going to read about it ever again. And yeah, you may have multiple waypoints depending on your level of tolerance, of risk tolerance, etc. But still, it's a fluid process. And I'm conscious of time. I think I want to leave it with that innovation, for innovation to happen, we need to continually question, to continually test our approach, to continually test our structure, and be ready to pivot. So innovative, and if we talk in software terms, innovative software, intuitive software, is the one that does not just consume information from other software, but questions the existence of that information. Why you are sending me, the legacy system that I've been having for 30 years, sending me that information? What am I going to get out of it? And then that questioning allows software to do self-testing, basically, and to fail when it needs to fail, and to highlight that so that you know about it. We can talk on and on about it, and we, as Kunen said, we're more than happy, when this pandemic is over, hopefully with all of us safe and sound, to organize a face-to-face and walk through this in your own organizations and make this a bit more tangible and less theoretical. However, these principles are the backbone of what we face to be problems in organizations, and what we advise for you to always have at the back of your mind, especially these three. And yeah, we're not, my understanding is that we're not going to have a Q&A question, but please, these are our emails. If you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer them and elaborate further. And thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. That was really interesting. I guess I had one follow-up question, and Dan, jump in if you had any, around when you talk about fluid stage gates, which I quite like, because you're right that it's so different for every organization. So for one organization, writing a very detailed business case brief type document is something they can do quite easily with a degree of accuracy that they're confident in. And for but getting to a stage where they have an MVP and they start testing an actual product is quite a big journey for them. And then there's other organizations that I've got a couple of in mind where it's actually the reverse. And for them, quickly coming up, they have an idea, let's quickly make a product and then test it. although for most organizations, that's not what I'd recommend. For them, that's really quick and easy. So it's about finding what works for you, I suppose.
It is the silver lining, right? And it is basically, as I mentioned, on the one hand, the level of risk tolerance that you have in an organization, and the second one, to continually test, do I have the information I need to make a decision? There is a number of cases that our organization drop ideas without having the correct information to make that decision, just because of intuition, just because I think I know the market, just because a number of different answers I've heard over the years. The most important is, what is your level of risk tolerance and what you are ready to give up to allow teams to take ownership, which first of all is management. So in rigid management and, in the traditional sense of it. And secondly, do I have the correct information I need? And questioning that and going back to the teams if you don't have it. Don't make a decision with the wrong information. Just refer back to the team and say, I need this, this, and that to make a decision. And that will make decisions much more meaningful, I would say.
Yeah. I think the key word is assumptions, isn't it? And the best teams are just hyper aware as they go through each step of what their assumptions are that they're making at each of these decision processes, and what biases or things that they've accepted as truth, but actually when they think about it, where did I really get that truth from? Is it something that I've just absorbed over time, or do I actually know it?
Which goes back to the point that Cynan made, and Dan made, that it is all about user centricity. So you need to identify who your user is and what do they care about, and continually test that. So we've had a number of cases where you'd have senior executives that they say, I've been in that position for 15 years. I know what this person needs. I'm like, no, it doesn't really work like that, especially in an ever-changing environment. So yeah, I mean, that's basic, I think, principles that will allow at least a culture of innovation to flourish.
Yeah. Be aware, even just write them down and then test them. It's the simplest way to understand whether they're. I was muted for some reason there. There we go. Okay, so thank you everybody for your time today. I've personally thought that was very, very interesting to hear it from your breadth of experience and specific examples as well. Is really valuable, and hopefully you guys, the audience, found that valuable as well. Let us know your feedback. It's really important to us. There's potential that alongside our physical events that are usually hosted in London, the workshops that this would have been, that we can continue to do these webinars. So if you feel that this was valuable for you, let us know. Get in touch on Twitter or via email, which is on our website. So a little bit of a exclusive offer for our delegates. So as I said, the Innovation Bootcamp is a series of events that we're running this year. Unknown as of yet how many of those are going to be physical or online, but we're running an exclusive offer for people who attend. So if you attend 3 out of 6 of our events or webinars, you can receive a free innovation audit, which is essentially a capability assessment or a readiness assessment, similar to some of the questions that Cynan was posing as he was looking at his innovation loop. Attend 4 out of 6 and receive a half-day innovation strategy workshop. And if you attend all of them, so there'll be some people on this call who are at the first event and they're still in the running to get all 6, you'll benefit from a half-day innovation strategy workshop with the Idea Drop team, as well as an accelerated sandbox experience of the platform. So you can start to fuse some of the learnings you're taking from these events and see how you could build that into a real system for your organization. So yeah, don't forget to tweet us, use the hashtag IdeaDropBootcamp and mention us at This Is IdeaDrop. We also have a LinkedIn group, so we are building a network of innovation experts and enthusiasts. Great place to share your experiences, share your challenges, and learn from some of the best in the business. So be sure to look that up as well. I know that some of the details will be sent around in a follow-up email. But that is all for today. So thank you, everybody, for your time, and thank you for viewing. And we will hopefully see you at our next event. Bye for now.